I will talk to you about being an ally and an advocate. What is an ally of refugees and immigrants in the class? I have worked for many years doing training for adult educators on becoming allies for social justice. Specifically, my background, I worked for a number of years since the 1990s on social justice for the LGBT students and teachers. And then as things started to evolve in the early 2000s, I started to work also on becoming allies of refugees, of immigrants, and of people of other religions. And of course, the current situation, our students are the recipients of a double or triple whammy. That is what I call the fact that they are immigrants, so from another culture. They come often from, they are of a different race, they may be of different religions, and they are the targets of an intersectionality of oppression. So I often start the training with this famous quote from the New Colossus. And the reason, I'm not going to read it, you all know it well, but the reason I start with this is that many people identify, many citizens of the United States identify this as one of the fundamental values of our country. And the situation that immigrants and refugees are facing today is a challenge to this fundamental value. That is, we are now saying we are closing the door, we are not lifting the lamp by the door, and we are certainly saying, well, give me some of your tire, but not if you come from certain countries, not if you profess a certain religion. So to me, this is a way to start the conversation because it has to do with what we value as a country or what we used to value. So right now, for a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes, go to the chat room and answer the question, what is an ally? What is a teacher ally? So think of this as a brainstorming exercise. I don't expect that you are ready to become an ally today unless you're ready. So who is an ally? Someone who views the fight as her own. Good. Challenging the concept of the other. Someone who can challenge their own privilege. Very good. Someone who stands alongside. Okay. A friend. A person who works together to solve a problem. Analyze a friend. Someone who helps you. Well, we have a good idea, and I appreciate this is going so fast that I cannot even read it, but someone who supports, a person who listens, that's a very good one, and understands and is able to support your cultural mediator, someone in your corner. Well, thank you very much. Now that gets you thinking, and we can now read another one, and this is a challenge. This is a challenge to all of you. The trouble is that once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. And once you have seen it, keeping quiet, saying nothing becomes as political an act as speaking out. There is no innocence. Either way, you are accountable. I like this quote because I think it reflects exactly what happens. You are the teacher. You are the witness of a situation, a culture in which our students or our neighbors are being attacked. They are being oppressed. They are being derided. They are being told they need to leave the country. When you see, and once you have seen this behavior, you cannot unsee it. Once you have witnessed the fact that our students are the victims of oppression, you cannot unsee it. And the problem is here, and this is the challenge to all of us as teachers, is once we are aware that there is a problem, once we have become aware that there is oppression in our midst, in our classroom, in our community, then we have to do something. We cannot be innocent. That's why Denzel said that I believe that in building a community of respect, you cannot be neutral. Either you are with your students and supporting, or you are not, and you are in a way part of the problem. And this is the big challenge that I want to present to all of you. How do we become active allies of the communities we serve? So, and I will give you later some of the resources that I'm using, but here you have a quick ideas of who we are. Allies are partners in empowering and empowerment who speak out against social injustice. And we are talking today about immigration and refugees, and those are topics that are foremost in the national narrative today. But I am also talking about injustice against a variety of other identities, whether it is sexual identity or it is race, as we talked earlier. And then allies recognize oppression broadly and standing in solidarity with anyone who experiences oppression, whether or not the ally also belongs to a targeted group. That is, you don't have to be or acknowledge that you are a member of a targeted group to be an ally. And in fact, Jose Ramon Vargas says that we don't have to be immigrants ourselves to be allies of the immigrant population. So that you don't have to recognize yourself as a member of any targeted group. And in fact, oftentimes, the strongest ally that our students will have is an ally that does not come from the targeted group. An ally is a member of the advantaged social group who takes a stand against social injustice. So, for example, whites who speak out against racism, men who are anti-sexist. When a form of oppression has multiple targeted groups, as do racism, ableism, and heterosexism, targeted group members can be allies to other targeted groups that they are not part of. What this means is, first of all, you have to know that you belong to an advantaged social group. And this is something that many of us have a very hard time understanding. We see ourselves as teachers or educators. We are not necessarily, we don't feel that we make money. We are not advantaged like that. We don't feel that we have privilege. And yet, one thing that we have to do is acknowledge that in our sphere of influence, we do have an advantage. One of the advantages that we probably have is education. Another one is, excuse me, I'm running out of voice. So we need to start by understanding our own privilege. I put in the earlier in the chat room a reference to the work of Peggy McIntosh. Peggy McIntosh is a person who in the 1980s pretty much came up with the concept of white privilege, and I invite you to read her work. She was actually not doing research on white privilege when she came up with this monumental work. It's just 35 pages long, but it is monumental in terms of what its impact has been. She was doing research on sexism and specifically on women, and started to realize that she was privileged because she was a white woman, while she was a targeted member because she was a woman, and she was being oppressed because women are oppressed in the United States or treated differently than men. She realized that while oppressed member of one group, she was privileged because she was white. She was member of another group that was privileged while being member of a targeted group. This is the idea that allies can be part of one target group and yet allies to another. So what is it that we have to do? I will share the link to Peggy McIntosh later, but you can find it. She is a professor emeritus or emerita at Wesley College. So I can give you some of our of the resources later. Anyway, the first thing that we need to do is to be very comfortable in our own skin. And I can give you an example. Just this week, I was part of a discussion group on racism. Most of us are white in that group, and a person talked to me who said, well, I feel so guilty because I am white. If you are feeling guilty because you are white, then you're not comfortable in your own skin at this point. In order to be a successful ally, you have to be comfortable in your group. You have to be to acknowledge your identity, know who you are, and be comfortable with who you are. Allies acknowledge that there is a problem. When we start a discussion that starts with ignoring the problem, saying, oh, no, there is really no racism in this country, or racism is over. We elected a black president 8 years ago, so there is no problem now anymore. You're not ready to be an ally if you don't even acknowledge the problem. It is also important to learn the facts. That is, and I underline the word fact here, because you do not want to be an ally using alternative facts or fake news. You want to have all the facts and be as informed about the problem as possible, not only because it's important to help understand the issues. To understand the issues is important, but also because it illuminates your own position. If you do not know the facts, you do not have the opportunity to think about what is your position in that context. You have to be willing to be taught and to learn. And by learn here, it's very specifically, I'm saying learn from the members of the target group. That is, learn from immigrants. Listen to their stories, understand their experience. It's easy to learn from books, from websites, from our resources. Let's listen to each other and listen to the stories of the members of the target group that we are trying to support or to be an ally to. We must be committed to making a difference, and we must be willing to understand that acting against social injustice is both to help the target person, but it's also to help ourselves. It is in our own self-interest to live in a community, work in a school that is welcoming to immigrants, that is not suffering from a major injustice. So acting against racism, yes, of course, it will help people who are of a different race, blacks, for example, but it also helps you if you are a member of the majority because it generates a more cohesive community. And I'm talking about race, I'm talking about immigration, but these are ideas that support allies or that go to educating allies, whichever group you are helping, whichever group you're an ally of. So, for example, the LGBT community, transgender people right now are targets. To me, it's an issue that it didn't exist, but it became an issue because of politics. So now they are members of a target group, and becoming allies. If you're going to become an ally of any member of the LGBT community or the community at large, all the letters of that larger community, you can follow the same concepts, the same ideas, who you are vis-a-vis that community. That is, what is your own sexual identity or gender identity. So, more generally, social justice teachers, you have to be aware of your identity. You have to confront your own prejudice. And here we talk about earlier we talked about bias. You have to respond to confront your own prejudice and to your own bias, but also respond to bias comments in the classroom. And this is something that many teachers fail to do. I've been working with teachers on this area over 25 years, and often I see that they prefer to let a biased comment pass because they don't want to create confrontation, but the confrontation is already there. If you hear something biased, you need to respond and cut it. I call it interrupting oppression. Well, it's not my phrase, but you interrupt oppression when you respond immediately to a biased comment. You need to be open to a certain degree of disclosure. Use your experience as an example, and you must deal with emotional intensity. And this is important because we are dealing with issues when we are dealing with oppression, with issues that make people very uncomfortable. People may cry, and many do. People get intensely emotional, sometimes upset that the discussion is taking place. So you have to be careful because you could lose control. And that's something that that is not going to hurt anyone, but you need to know how to deal with this emotional intensity. So I will give you more resources, but basically what you have to do is take responsibility for learning about your own target group, your own heritage, culture, and experience, and then acknowledge how oppression works in everyday life. What is oppression? How is oppression manifested? How is oppression working? And sometimes it's implicit in the bias of everyday life. How is oppression working around you? And sometimes you don't even know it. There is individual oppression, there is institutional oppression. Where are we? Where are you in your context when you're working? How aware are you of oppression in your communities? Allies listen, as we said earlier, and respect the perspectives and experiences of targeted group members. We cannot, again, I will emphasize once again, we cannot listen and we cannot respect the perspective if we are not willing to learn from the ones that we intend to help. Finally, we must acknowledge that we have unearned privileges. I heard earlier the privilege of having been born white, or the privilege of having been born in this country when we're talking to immigrants or working with immigrants. And it's all relative, of course, but the privilege, we need to work to change that privilege and turn it into a right that extends to everybody, no matter what group they are. And we need to be willing to take a risk and try new behaviors. And sometimes we start with very, very small steps. We don't necessarily grow suddenly into a fully functional ally. We need to learn how to do it. We need to learn to take small steps one at a time.
One of the things I really wanted to find out was, we're asking for a lot of introspection, a lot of very uncomfortable things. How do we avoid ourselves getting defensive or other people getting defensive? Is it simply that we just must stress what the consequences are, what the implications for this are? Stacey, you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think, and Federico really touched upon this, is really having a thick skin. And I think a lot of it also has to do with how you approach the conversations. So rather than, accusing somebody of being racist or, we can't control what they say, but we can control our reaction. So I'm using what we say as I statements. Like, I am troubled by the comment you made because, etc. And another example would be, can I just quickly, because I know people liked my 3Fs analogy, I actually have another one that we sometimes use, which is, I will say, I understand what you're feeling. I have felt that way before myself, but I've done some self-reflection, and what I have found is. So you're acknowledging their feeling and then redirecting it.
Yeah, and I don't have much to add to that, Stacy. Really, it starts with the first step, which is how do you feel in your own skin? Are you strong in your identity? Can your identity take a little bit of a beating? Acknowledging that can be part of oppression and of behaviors that we are trying to stand up against, and then suddenly realizing that, oh, wait a moment, I may be part of the problem, or I walk about with a privilege that I did not earn, I was born with. That is a bit bruising for the old ego or for the identity. So it's important to have some level of strength and safety in your own skin before you can deal with these problems.
And if we want to give our attendees a little tip or advice on how do they frame this idea, let's say they want to propose it to their principal, that you want to do an implicit bias training, or you want something like that. How do you think they should go about doing this? What kind of words should they use? What are the consequences? What are the potential benefits that the school will accrue?
I would absolutely connect it to student success and academic achievement, because the research suggests that if students are being sidetracked or concerned about getting bullied or having negative interactions or being teased because of their identity, they are not able to focus on their studies, and it ultimately impacts their student success. I also say that implicit or anti-bias training is designed for the whole community, that everybody can benefit from learning about their biases and overcoming them, because everybody should be able to walk into that school every day and feel like they matter and that they belong regardless of their identity.
And going a little bit further than that, training on bias, on implicit bias, and also on how to be successful allies. If you don't want to use the phrase social justice, you can talk about diversity, but it creates a diverse climate, and administrators like to hear that you are trying to put together a situation where there is a climate that the diversity of the students is respected. That's why in my training I use so much the idea of communities, building a community of respect.